Okay, get ready to dive into some serious exercise science because today we're tackling some major myths.
I love it. Myths busted.
You sent us this fascinating interview with Harvard's Daniel Lieberman, and wow, talk about challenging conventional wisdom.
No, absolutely.
So where should we even start with this one?
Well, I think what makes Lieberman's work so interesting is that he takes this evolutionary medicine perspective.
Okay.
So it's not just about like looking at how we exercise today. It's like zooming out and looking at how humans have evolved to move over like thousands of years.
Okay, so how does he actually study that?
So he travels the world and he studies indigenous groups, people living in environments more similar to our ancestors.
Oh,
For example, the Tarahumara people in Mexico who are known for their long-distance running.
I've heard of them, yeah.
And get this, they don't even have a word for training.
Wait, seriously, they just run.
They run. It's not a separate activity. It's just part of their way of life, which kind of gets at the heart of Lieberman's whole thing. Our bodies are made to move.
It makes you wonder about all of those, like, modern exercise benchmarks we hear all the time,
Yes.
Like 10,000 steps a day or 8 hours of sleep.
Totally. A lot of these things we think are like gospel when you actually dig into it.
Where did these numbers even come from?
Exactly, like that 10,000 steps thing. It actually started as a marketing campaign, a Japanese pedometer company in the 60s.
You're kidding. I always thought that was like based on hard science or something.
Right, but it's a good example of how even well-intentioned advice can kind of get distorted. I mean, 10,000 steps isn't a bad goal in itself, but it's more about we shouldn't just accept these things without understanding the context, right?
Absolutely. So if we're not beholden to these random numbers,
Yeah.
what's the guiding principle we should be following?
Lieberman calls it the use it or lose it principle.
Okay, makes sense.
Our bodies are incredibly adaptable, right? If you challenge them physically, they're going to rise to the occasion. But the flip side is if you neglect movement, your body's like, okay, I guess we're just going to conserve energy then.
And that's where things start to go downhill.
Yeah, and you start seeing things like sarcopenia, which is basically muscle loss that happens with age.
And it's not just about, like, getting weaker, right?
Right. It's not just about feeling a little bit weaker. Sarcopenia has this huge ripple effect on your whole system, your metabolism, bone density, energy levels.
It affects everything.
Yeah, even cognitive function. It's wild.
So it's not about, like, fighting aging.
Yeah.
It's more about giving your body what it needs to thrive at every age.
Exactly. And there was this fascinating study done with Harvard alumni. They found that those who were more active had lower death rates.
Interesting.
And that protective effect actually became more pronounced as they got older.
Wow, that's amazing. But then how do we take all of this use it or lose it stuff and actually apply it to our modern lives? I mean, most of us aren't out there hunting and gathering every day.
That is the million-dollar question. And that's what we're going to dig into next. I know we're talking about movement, but there's this whole other thing. Sitting is the new smoking.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
So which is it? Should we be moving all the time, or are we all going to die if we sit for more than 5 minutes?
I know, right? Like,
Oh.
just make up your mind.
Well, Lieberman actually talks about this. He brings up hunter-gatherers again, because you would think they're moving all day long, right?
Yeah, constantly.
But he points out they did actually sit.
Really? I guess that makes sense.
But it's more about how they sat.
Okay, how do you mean?
Well, they didn't have our comfy office chairs or Netflix to keep them glued to one spot for hours.
True.
They were constantly getting up and moving around, doing different tasks. So their sitting was more like interrupted sitting.
So it's more about just making sure you're getting up and moving around throughout the day.
Exactly. Like get up to grab a glass of water, pace around during phone calls, little things like that.
Right, right. What about sleep? Is 8 hours really the magic number?
That's another one of those things that gets repeated so often we just assume it must be true. Right. But there's evidence that hunter-gatherers probably only average closer to 6 or 7 hours.
Interesting. Maybe Edison really did mess with our sleep when he invented the light bulb.
Huh. Could be. But the point is, our bodies are more adaptable than we think.
Right. It's not about hitting these arbitrary targets. It's about making sustainable changes.
Exactly. And you know, this all ties into another concept. Lieberman talks about the comfort crisis.
The what?
Mm-hmm.
Comfort crisis. Okay, now I'm really interested. Tell me more.
Well, he's basically saying that our world has become so incredibly comfortable. I mean, think about it. Comfy chairs, elevators, cars.
You don't have to work for anything anymore.
Exactly. We've engineered physical effort out of our lives. Which might be why we're seeing so many health problems, right?
It's true. Like, it's so easy to just take the easy way out. Like, why walk up the stairs when you can take the elevator?
Yeah. And Lieberman says it's because our brains are still kind of wired like our ancestors, We crave comfort. We're programmed to conserve energy.
That makes sense. And now we have all of these things that make it so easy to do just that.
Exactly. And he gave that really interesting example about the Bjorn Borg company.
Oh, yeah, the company that makes their employees exercise.
Yes. The CEO there is a huge exercise buff, and he actually mandates that all employees take a company-wide sports hour every week.
I have to admit, when I first heard that, I was like, whoa, that's a little intense, isn't it?
It's definitely different.
I mean, should companies really be able to dictate how their employees spend their free time?
That's a valid question for sure.
On one hand, I get it. They want their employees to be healthy. But on the other hand, it feels a little, I don't know,
Over the top?
maybe? It's just interesting to think about.
It is interesting, and apparently a lot of the employees actually like it.
Really?
Yeah, it's like a part of their culture now. They do it together, so it's more social.
Which I guess plays into that whole idea of social motivation and exercise, right?
Mm.
Like we've talked about before, having a workout buddy or going to a class can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. It makes it more fun. You're more likely to stick with it.
It's like anything else. If you don't enjoy it, you're probably not going to do it.
Exactly. And there's the accountability factor, too. You're less likely to bail if you know someone is expecting you.
It's like that saying, accountability is the glue that holds your commitments together.
I love it. I'm going to have to steal that one.
Right, like even just having a standing date to go for a walk can make all the difference.
Totally. And it's interesting how this ties back to that whole dopamine thing we were talking about earlier.
With exercise.
Yeah, like if you're not used to exercising regularly, those first few times might not feel so great.
Oh, tell me about it.
Your brain is like, wait, what are we doing? This is hard.
It's true. You don't get that, like, runner's high everyone talks about.
Right. It takes time for your brain to start associating movement with pleasure, to actually crave those endorphins.
So what's the key? How do you get past that initial hurdle?
I think that's where finding something you genuinely enjoy is so important.
Okay.
Because, if you hate running, forcing yourself to suffer through miles on a treadmill.
It's not going to magically make you love it.
Exactly. You're just reinforcing that negative association.
Right, right. It's like anything else. You have to find that sweet spot between challenge and enjoyment.
Exactly. And Lieberman actually argues that we've become a little too obsessed with the exercise is medicine mentality.
Interesting. How so?
It's like we forget that moving our bodies can be, fun, like something we do for pleasure and not just as a chore to check off our list.
Oh, I totally get that. I know I'm guilty of that sometimes.
Right. It's like I should work out. I should burn this many calories instead of just like moving in ways that feel good.
Yes.
Yeah.
I need to work on that.
It's so easy to get caught up in those shoulds.
It's like we're always looking for that magic workout,
Mhm.
Like if we could just find that one perfect routine, all our problems would be solved.
Right. But the truth is, the best exercise is the one you'll actually do consistently.
That's so true. I've wasted so much time and energy trying to force myself to enjoy things I just don't.
It doesn't have to be the gym. It could be dancing, gardening, playing with your kids, whatever brings you joy.
I love that. And this has been such a good reminder to be kind to ourselves throughout the process.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not about perfection. It's about progress.
So, as we wrap up here, what's the one big takeaway you hope people remember from this deep dive?
I think if we can just shift our perspective on exercise, even a little, that's a huge win.
Okay.
It's not a punishment, it's a gift. It's a way to connect with our bodies, tap into our potential, and just experience the joy of movement.
I love that. Movement as a celebration of what our bodies can do, not a punishment for what we ate or whatever.
Yes, exactly. Ditch the guilt. Find what you love and get moving. Your body will thank you.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive into the amazing world of exercise and evolution. This has been amazing.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, keep those questions coming, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep moving.